Ukraine, new world order.
Yep.
Big news, Gonz. Big news that could have ramifications for our involvement in World War III, being reported all over the place, but I'm going to take it from HuffPost here because they keep it short. The headline is U.S. filmmaker Brent Renaud killed by Russian forces in Ukraine, police. And it goes like this. An award-winning American journalist and filmmaker was killed by Russian forces outside Kyiv on Sunday, the head of the region's police force said. Brent Renaud, a 51-year-old Peabody Award recipient, was fatally shot in Irpin, northwest of Ukraine's capital. A second journalist was injured along with him, and Andriy Nibitov
said Andriy.
Said Andriy Nibitov, the head of Kyiv's regional police force, in a message posted on Facebook. Warning, the message includes disturbing photos of a body believed to be that of the filmmaker. Nibitov also shared a photo of Renaud's passport and media credentials issued by the New York Times. Quote, of course, the profession of journalism carries risks. Nonetheless, U.S. citizen Brent Renaud paid with his life trying to highlight the deceit, cruelty, and ruthlessness of the aggressor, Nebitov's post read. Renaud was not on assignment for the Times in Ukraine at the time of his death. A Times press badge he was wearing had been issued for an assignment, quote, many years ago, a spokesperson for the news outlet said Sunday. Quote, we are deeply saddened to hear of Brent Renaud's death. Brent was a talented filmmaker who had contributed to the New York Times over the years, the Times said in a statement. Quote, PBS NewsHour reporter Jane Ferguson said on Twitter that she was at the roadside scene where Renaud's body lay under a blanket and that there was nothing Ukrainian medics could do for him. Yeah, well, that's usually how death works, but okay. Thank you, Jane Ferguson. She quoted an outraged Ukrainian police officer saying, quote, tell America, tell the world what they did to a journalist. Danilo Shapovalov, a surgeon volunteering for the Ukrainian Territorial Defense, told AFP that the journalists were riding in a car when they were shot at. Quote, where there were two journalists and one of ours, a Ukrainian, he told the news outlet. Our guy and the journalist are wounded. I provided them first aid. The other one received a wound in the neck. He died immediately. The White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, speaking on CBS News, quote, Face the Nation, called news of a U.S. journalist's death, quote, obviously shocking and horrifying, and said it's just the latest example of brazen aggression by Russian forces. Quote, I'll be consulting with my colleagues. We'll be consulting with the Ukrainians to determine how this happened and then to measure and execute appropriate consequences as a result of it, he said. End of article. Okay, so I'm not sure if this really is shocking, as was suggested by Jake Sullivan. There's a couple things going on here, Gonz. First of all, when a journalist gets killed, that's when the news really takes offense.
Well, because it's one of their own.
It's one of their own.
Their team.
One of their elite family members. Pretty fascinating that he was using an old press badge, which kind of put the New York Times in a weird position. But this fella, basically had kind of gone rogue, was not under the protection of, one of the official protection of one of the big press outlets. However, he did have a New York Times badge and was kind of doing his own thing.
Yeah. Just a quick mention, if you go to, so he had a brother that he made films with and did projects with, RenaudBrothers.com. And on the homepage here, there's a Boston Globe by Brett Renaud, and then a picture, a black and white photo from, I guess, one of the protests, and the caption here, Black Lives Matter in a haven for white supremacists. So he's definitely woke. or was.
Yeah, of course. Well, he's a journalist.
Yeah. Well.
So, there's just something fishy about this story.
Yeah.
And, I'm not questioning the death. I'm not even really questioning the cause of the death or whatever. But the way it's being presented is, we learned about his death through a Facebook post from allegedly the head of police in the area. The kind of discussion about, yeah, he was dead on the side of the road with a blanket over him, and there's nothing our medics could do. It's just kind of a weird comment. He was shot at and killed in a car, as far as we know, with another journalist. So, obviously he teamed up with a local journalist. Yeah,
there's no way to know who shot them.
There's no way to know.
The fact that they're just saying, oh, the Russians did it. It's like, well, how do we? There's no way for us to know.
There's no traditional sort of reliable primary source reporting of this.
Yeah.
There's nobody saying we witnessed the Russians killing them. There's nobody saying. I mean, I guess one of the other reporter lives, but there's no quote like from the alive reporter who's like, yes, I was there with. What's his name?
Renaud.
Brent Renaud. I was there with him, and then the Russians came up and said, "We're Russian, and we are going to kill you now." And then they did. There's none of that like traditional,
more of a
ingredients of what goes into reporting a story
and describing the confrontation here. They just talk about he's dead, and then sort of the aftermath. A little bit
like
of the
they
aftermath.
Just found him on the side of the road. Which is just fishy. I don't know. There's not much more to deconstruct besides, this is a very useful tool. It's one thing for soldiers to get killed. It's another thing for, Ukrainian maternity ward to get bombed. But when it's an American journalist, it's a trigger that is almost undeniable, which is, again, look, I gotta be skeptical of the story because you have a Ukrainian police officer saying, "Tell America, tell the world what they did to a journalist," as if it's just a very useful, horrible thing that can push the media more than anything. It's not even about the politics, not about Biden. It's about triggering the media into pushing for more involvement in what could potentially be nuclear war.
Well,
so I remain skeptical.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting also because when it comes to, identifying bodies and the fog of war and, things like that, did we bring the story or can I just mention it? The facial recognition?
Oh, we don't have it ready, but I mean, I can pull it up. It's
I was
right
just going to mention it.
Yeah,
I don't want to
do it because it is kind of relevant to what we're talking about here. At least.
There's a story from Reuters talking all about how Ukraine has started using Clearview AI's facial recognition during war, and one of the main things they're using it for is identifying dead bodies.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Did they use it on this guy? Is it because they don't show a body? They don't show, there's no primary source identification of the fella. I would assume that they got his identity from his press badge. That's how they think it's him because he's probably carrying papers or they just mentioned the press badge, which again, you got to kind of be skeptical of because, I mean, they found one of the 9/11 hijackers' passport on the ground in front of the World Trade Center. Like, okay, all right, that's how you know who hijacked the plane is because you found his passport. So, I think that the press badge definitely has something to do with this, but there's also a possibility in some in some fictional version, a novel of this story, that his press badge got lifted and is used to kind of, to identify this body as him, to trigger the U.S. media into pushing for more involvement. Yeah. I have no evidence. I don't even believe that necessarily. I'm just saying they're really leaving a lot of gaps in the story. And as we see over and over and over, a lot of horrible things can happen in the world. But when it happens to a journalist, suddenly we must go to war.